I've been thinking about this sharing. Paul actually asked me to share about this a while back, and I wasn't quite prepared to do that because, with a lot of things in Christ, you don't really know, or at least I didn't know completely what was God's will, even though a series of things happen and you know that, His hand is in it. So we came back from China at this point about 4 years ago. So we came back December 2018. And, the kids started a new school. I started a new job. And about 2.5 years later, I finished a lot of things I wanted to do at work. And I kind of just wanted to do something different. It wasn't really anything. There was nothing wrong with my old job. There was no real awesome opportunity that came up either. So it was a relatively casual thing. So I went and I had lunch with some people, and one of them said, "Why don't you come and join our group?" And I just kind of said, "Okay." It was, as I said, I didn't, it wasn't anything really compelling, but I wanted to do something different. The opportunity came up, and at the time I thought, the Lord is the Lord who opens doors. And given that there's an offer, I can also take it to say that it's God's will, right? Because if it's not God's will, then I wouldn't have the offer. That's kind of how I thought about it. So there's a story in the Bible, and it came up again, I think when Tom was sharing about Pergamum in the book of Revelation, which is in Numbers chapter 22. So it's a story. It actually runs multiple chapters in the book of Numbers, and it's the story of Balaam and Balak. So I don't know how many people know that story in the Bible. So Balaam is a prophet in the Bible, and he's a well-known prophet, and Balak is the king. He was afraid that this is towards kind of the end of the 40-year journey the Israels had in the wilderness, and Israels were winning a lot of battles, and Balak was afraid. So King Balak was afraid that the Israelites were going to come and conquer his country and conquer his land. So he asked Balaam, so he paid Balaam, or he wanted to pay Balaam to come and curse the Israelites. So he said, "You're a well-known prophet. What you say always come true. I will pay you. Come and curse the Israelites for me." And Balaam prayed to God, and God said, "Don't go." And Balaam said, "I can't go. God told me I can't go." But you will see throughout the multiple chapters in Numbers, as well as in the New Testament when Balaam is mentioned, he wanted to go. He wanted to make the money. But God clearly told him not to, right? And I feel like a lot of times we're like Balaam. Like when I was going through this episode, multiple times I said to God, "God, if you don't want me to go, just tell me." Right? Like I'm not stupid. If you tell me don't take the new job, I'm not going to take the new job. But if you don't tell me anything, then I don't know what to do. But in this case, God told him, "Don't go." But he kept on praying, right? And the king also, Balak also kept on upping the ante. So he kept on saying, "Come and I'll give you more. Come and I'll give you silver, I'll give you gold, I'll give you more." And he kept on going back to God. And he kept on praying to say, "Can I go? God, will you let me go?" When God clearly told him, "Don't go," the first time. So finally, God actually told him, "You can go. Go. But only speak the words that I give you." Right? So what did God do? So God gave him words to bless the Israelites. So then obviously King Balak got really pissed, right? He's like, "I paid you to come and curse the Israelites. You come and you're blessing them." But he said, I can't say anything other than the words that God is telling me to say. But there's also a very interesting episode on his way to see King Balak. He was on a donkey. And he was on a donkey, and the donkey won't go forward. And he was whipping the donkey. And the donkey spoke. So the donkey opened his mouth and said, "Why are you beating me? Have I not been obedient to you all throughout the years that I'm a servant to you?" It was something like that. Here we go. Can you go back up? Can you go back up? what have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times? And he said, am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden to this day? Have I been in habit of doing this to you? And he said, no, right? Like, you've always been a very obedient donkey. So why won't you go the way that I want you to go? And this is where the angel came and said, this is the verse that when I was reading it, and I think I was like annoying the heck out of my husband at that time, because I would come home every day and I would talk to him about this. I'm like, should I go? Should I not go? I'm really struggling because I thought it was a really easy decision. But when I resigned, my boss told me to stay and gave me a lot of good reasons, which I said was anticipated. I mean, this is the 3rd time I'm working for him, right? So if he made no attempt to retain me, that's really terrible. So I absolutely expected him to retain me, but he gave me a ton of good reasons. It was just becoming a very convoluted situation. I already promised the other team. That announcement had already gone out. They had already rearranged the office so that I have an office. So it was just a really messed up situation where, I kind of also felt like, why am I in this mess? It really was not necessary, right? Like, I kind of just unnecessarily got myself into this mess. But this verse really spoke to me when I, at that time. It said, where did it go? Here. Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? I have come here to oppose you, because your path is a reckless one before me. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If it had not turned away, I would certainly have killed you by now, and I would have spared it. But I would have spared it. So, at the time, my thinking was still a little bit like Balaam, which is, like, a job is a job, right? This job is a job, that job is a job. Like, all I'm doing is going to work and do work and I come home. For me, they're really not that different. But it was turning into a bit of an embarrassment, meaning if I don't go, like, they didn't put out a job posting and try to, I was the one who went and said, hey, like, is there anything else you think I can do differently, right? Like, so this wasn't like some recruiter or some headhunter came to speak with me. I was the one who initiated it. So I really had in my head at the time that it was my choice, that as long as I do work and I honor God, I didn't really think God cares what job I have, right? And I kind of felt like I should just take the one that embarrasses me the least. And this verse, I thought was that was like, it was a long process. It was like over a period of 2 months that I was going back and forth and thinking about it every day. And it was a pretty long time. And I thought God kind of probably just got fed up with me and gave me a very clear verse. I read Old Testament, and most of the time when I read I like reading Old Testament just because I like the stories in there and I feel like there are lots of lessons. But usually the words of New Testament I feel like are more applicable to us. And most of the time I find personally that the New Testament words resonate with me more. So when I was reading the Old Testament, I was just reading it. And this verse where it says, your path is a reckless one before me, and I would have certainly have killed you by now. After I read this verse, I was a little bit like, okay, so then that's done, that's settled, right? Like I can't go, because it's one thing to say there's ambiguity and I don't know what God's will is and I have a bit of room to make my own decision. It is another thing when God gives you a clear instruction and it would be reckless, right? I mean, unless I stop believing in God and I stop believing that He's the Lord and He's almighty, then it would really be stupid to have a verse like this and still go down the path that I want to go down. But the decisions we make are not without consequence, right? So I stayed with my existing job. I burned a lot of bridges in that process. And as I said, there's nothing wrong with my old job. But there was also nothing new, right? So I kind of felt like, okay, God, is there like a higher meaning to all of this? Is there something better? But anyway, I stayed. And I think throughout, so it's been almost 18, it's almost been 2 years since I made that decision. I think it was like 2 years ago over the summer that this happened. And I was sharing during Friday night fellowship that for my work, I pray more now. I pray more now than I used to. And I was thinking about that over the past 2 days when I was thinking about this sharing. I think in my head, I pray more because work has become harder, because work is no longer about me just doing something and there's an outcome. Work is now much more about like my ability to get other people to do things, which I control much, much less of. But I think I also pray more now because of this experience. And I was thinking about that yesterday, which is I feel much more confident and I am much more at ease to bring everything at work to him. Because this is clearly the job that he wants me to do. And I burned a lot of bridges because of him. Well, that's a hard way to say that it's because of him. But I really feel much more confident for the first time that this is a job that he has given me and I'm doing what he wants me to do. Therefore, I am much more comfortable going before him, right? Any small thing, I would say, God, you put me here. So it's kind of, whatever the outcome, it's your, I actually do say to God, it's your problem. Like, you have to solve it for me. You put me here, right? And he does. He is so faithful. He's really, really faithful. I was telling Steve, Steve knows this because I've been handing over a bunch of responsibilities over the past few weeks to a new person who's coming. And it's just been a really messy process because, not because of me, right? Like I'm handing off my responsibilities, I'm done with it. But the teams are just really unhappy during this process. And then on Friday, we were able to find like just a really, like I always say people, like I'm a little bit of a pessimist when people say that there are win-win situations. I'm like, guys, this is a net zero game. You win, I lose. Like, let's not kid ourselves into win-win situations, right? Like, this is the real world here. But I really felt like, we got to a win-win situation where the new person got exactly what he wanted. And, the old team is also perfectly happy with the new arrangement. And it was just a complete surprise on Friday when it got resolved that way. And I really feel like now, and this is why like I encourage the kids and I encourage everybody to, the obedience and when we follow God's plan comes with blessings that are unanticipated. It was really hard for me to say 2 years ago, and this is part of the reason why Paul asked me to share about this earlier. I didn't want to because I'm kind of like, I did obey, but I really I kind of felt like I was the one who messed up. I'm like, this is just an unnecessary episode. I should have never started it. Then I would have never had that whole thing, and it would have been perfectly fine. But no, I think everything that happens in our life, even if we think it was the actions that we take, it has God's will in it. It has God's will in it. And his plan is, we may not see it. We may not see the entire picture just because we're human. But he does have a grand plan. And I think over time, if we just allow ourselves to experience him, then he makes it much more clear to us. Maybe not at this particular moment, but over time, he reveals his will. And he really is, he's a loving God who's never wrong, right? He has nothing but our best interest and our salvation and our eternity in his heart. So that's what I wanted to share.